Okay, today I'm going to show how to turn a sphere into an asteroid. So to begin, make sure you have the Extra Mesh Objects add-on enabled in your preferences, and also the Node Wrangler. Then hit Shift-A and add a round cube. I'll leave the radius set to 1, but I'll increase the arc value to 20. Then right-click and Shade Smooth. And I'll add a spotlight, rotate it to about 45 degrees, and move it over here. And I'll set the color to a light blue, and set the power to 400. Then I'll select the sphere, add a subdivision surface modifier, and set the viewport level to 3 and render level to 4. Then I'll add a displace modifier, but I need something to drive the displacement. So I'll switch to the material panel, create a new material, and for the type, I'll use clouds. And for the noise bias, I'll use Blender Original. And I'll leave these settings as they are, but it's looking a little crazy, so I'll go back to the modifier and set the strength to 0.2. Then I'll jump over to the shading workspace, switch to render display, and with the sphere selected, I'll click the new button and I'll call it rock. Then hit Shift-A and add a noise texture. Then I'll hold down Control and Shift and click on the noise texture so I can preview it on the sphere. And with the noise texture selected, I'll hit Control-T, and that will add a mapping node and a texture coordinate node. And I'll switch from generated to object coordinates. And for now, I'll set the scale to 12, the detail to 15, and the roughness to 0.6. Then I'll hit Shift-A and add a color ramp. And I'll drop it right here in front of the noise. And I'll adjust the sliders to make the dark areas darker and the light areas lighter. Something like that looks good for now. And this noise is going to drive my displacement, so I'll hit Shift-A and add a displacement node. I'll plug the noise into the height input, and I'll plug the displacement node into the displacement input on the material output node. And nothing happened because I need to come over to the material panel, scroll down to settings, and change the displacement setting to displacement and bump. And it still isn't doing anything, but if I come back to the displacement node, I can increase the scale to 1, which is obviously way too much, so I'll back it down to 0.1, and I'll set the mid-level to 0.2. And now it's starting to look like a rocky surface. So I'll change the noise scale to 5, and I can control the amount of displacement by adjusting the sliders on the color ramp. Wait a minute. I don't want to plug the noise into the displacement. I want to plug the color ramp into the displacement. And now I can adjust the color ramp sliders to control the displacement. And I want to keep things organized, so I'll select these two nodes, right-click and join in new frame. Then I'll right-click inside the frame and rename, and I'll name this base shape. And now I have the rocky shape that I want, so the next thing I want to do is set up my base texture values. So I'll hit Shift-A and add another noise texture, a color ramp, and an RGB curves node. And link them all together, plugging the noise color output into the color ramp. And I'll select all three, right-click and join a new frame, and right-click again, and rename to base values. Then I'll hit Shift-A and add a mixed color node. I'll plug the base values into input B and the base shape into input A. Then hold down Control and Shift and click on the mix node. And I'll change the mix to linear light, and I can move the factor slider to adjust the intensity. So I'll set it to about 350, and I'll come back over to the color ramp and hit the plus button to add another slider here in the middle, and I'll set the color to a dark gray, and that will give me more control over the values. and I can adjust the RGB curves to have even more control. And I think I'll adjust the linear light to 0.225, and that's good enough for now. So at this point, I want to have everything running through the principled BSDF. So I'll drop it here in front of the linear light node, and you see it's starting to look pretty good. But I also want the base values to drive some more detail. So I'll hit Shift A and add a bump node, and I'll plug the linear light result into the bump node and plug the bump into the normal input. I'll set the strength to 0.5 and the distance to 1, and it's a subtle effect, but it does make a difference. And now I want to add some colors, so I'll hit Shift A and add a noise texture and a color ramp and link them together, plugging the noise color output into the color ramp. Then I'll select both nodes, right click and join a new frame, and then right click and rename it to color. Then I'll add another mixed color node, and I'll drop it here in front of the linear light, and I'll plug the color into input B. And I'll change the mix type to overlay. And for the color, I want some dark, earthy tones, so I'll set the black RGB values to 0.009, 0.010, and 0.011. Then I'll click the plus button to add another slider in the middle, and I'll set the RGB values to 0.06, 0.052, and 0.032. And I'll set the white slider values to 0.099, 0.056, and 0.026. But you see the color isn't showing up, and that's because of the factor slider. Right now it's set to 0.5, so I'm getting half of the linear light and half of the color. If I drag the slider to 0, I'm getting just the linear light, and if I drag the slider to 1, I'm getting just the color. So I need something to control the factor. So I'll hit Shift A and add an ambient occlusion node and a color ramp. I'll set the samples to 8, and then I'll plug the ambient color output into the color ramp, and then I'll select both nodes, right click and join a new frame, then I'll right click and rename it to ambient occlusion. Then I'll plug the occlusion into the factor on the overlay node, and now I can control the factor amount by adjusting the sliders. And something else I need to do is plug the mapping node into my base values noise and the color noise. And then I'll hold down Control and Shift and click on the color ramp, so I'm just seeing the color. I'll leave the scale set to 5, but I'll set the detail to 10 and the roughness to 0.8. Then I'll Control Shift click on the BSDF node, and that's better, but it's looking a little flat. So I need to adjust the overall roughness, so I'll hit Shift A and add a color ramp, and I'll plug it into the roughness input on the BSDF node. And now I can adjust the sliders to get a little reflectivity. But I'm not happy with the overall shape, and I don't like these big white areas. So I'll come back to the base values, and I'll change the white slider to a light gray, and I'll change the noise detail to 15, and the roughness to 0.6, and I'll set the scale to 2.5, but that's still not affecting the white areas. So I'll come down to the base shape, and I'll hit Shift A and add a Voronoi texture. And I'll drop it between the noise and the color ramp, and I'll plug the distance into the color ramp. I'll change from F1 to smooth F1, and I'll set the scale to 6 and set the noise scale to 2.5. And that's basically it. From here you can continue tweaking the colors and settings until you get something that looks good. And you can always go back to your Displace modifier and change the texture to something else. If I can find the menu, I sometimes get lost in all these menus, but here it is. You can switch to Perlin or Cell Noise. And you can change the type to one of these others like Voronoi. And then you can change the distance metric to something like Manhattan. And adjust the intensity. And that's looking pretty good. And if you don't want a round asteroid, you can hit Shift A and add a lattice and scale it up so it's big enough to cover the model. Then come over here to the lattice properties and add some resolution, like maybe 4 for U, V, and W. Then select the model and add a lattice modifier. And for the object, I want to select the lattice. And now with the lattice selected, I can switch to edit mode and grab the vertices and start deforming the shape to get something a little more distorted. Maybe something like that. So yeah, that's about it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and post them below. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.